Thanks everyone for coming and to this artist talk and for Main Street Unionville Public Art Program. And my name is Yan Wu. I'm the Public Art Curator for the City of Markham. Before we start, I just would like to read the City of Markham Land Acknowledgement. The City of Markham is situated on the traditional territories of indigenous peoples, including the Haudenosaunee and the Anishinaabe. We are committed to reconciliation, partnership, and enhanced understanding. We're all treated people. Most of us have come here as settlers, immigrants, and newcomers in this generation or generations past. We'd like to also acknowledge and honor those who came here involuntarily, particularly the descendants of those brought here through enslavement. So for today, and the order will be, I give you a very brief introduction of how these public art commissions came about, just a brief of the process of that and how we landed to these final proposals. And then the artists here, Nestor Kruger and Patrick Cruz, will each give a presentation of their selected proposals. Then we will have a little bit period for questions, if anyone has. And after that, since there are food in the back and coffees and refreshments, so help us out. So the whole idea of this public art and as embedded in the program in Markham, it started in 2020 when we first developed the public art master plan. And so in the master plan, on one hand, we developed the visions and the objectives and also set up the governance model and production process. So all those different aspects to support the production and development of a public art program and the public art landscape and for the city of Markham. Then accompanied with the master plan, there's also an implementation plan to identify the different sites and within the 5-year time frame at the time for public art project to be conceived, designed, and in the city. Main Street Unionville is one of the key sites that was identified in the master plan as part of the early years for the implementation plan, given its important significance of as a heritage street and in the city. So then it's we were directed by the management and also the planning and colleagues is to conceive a public art program when we know there's going to be a major renovation happen on the street. So we're thinking is how we can tie some functional element of public art and that can be implemented and alongside and as part of this renovation, and it's also interesting in the framework of restorations for the street. So, so at the time, as a starting point, as a first step, is we worked with the external consultant, public art consultant, Art Plus Public Unlimited. And as a first step is to conduct a community engagement plan, is to really understand internally, externally, from the community and different voices, stakeholders in the process, what would they like to see on the street. So it end up as a document, and that is available online. So this is the website, and you can find everything related to this commission process. It can be found at Your Voice Markham, and then there's a dedicated page allocated to public art commissions. So all the related document is there. So after we did, we have to report and for the community engagement. So we started to have understanding of what kind of direction we should go, and the thematic wise, and also art form wise, and also what type of public art will be proper and for this site. So at the time, we also understand it's interesting to really how to respect the history, which is the heritage character of Unionville, and by the same time, how to embracing the newcomers, the new generations, but also to recognize the significance of Rouge River system playing a role and shaping any human activities happening in Markham. So I think that's also to think about how the existence of Main Street Unionville, how we actually can connect it to a larger ecological and cultural context. And so give it, renew its meaning and significance today. So I think that's when, and also technical-wise, and we have this public art interdepartmental working group, so that we meet with colleagues from planning, urban design, engineering, transportation, public realm, park and open spaces, and quarterly basis, and to discuss how to develop public art programs if we are really thinking to meet at a specific area. So that's really came about with the community engagement and public consultation, and also working with different departments, but also to think about the larger vision and for the city. So we decided there's an overall theme for the public art program at Main Street Unionville is wayfinding. So wayfinding is not only to think it as a technical term, utility as a wayfinder, but also to think it in temporal and spatial sense, and how public art work can really culturally thinking and ecologically thinking, and these mainstream Markham as a place, how it embedded in the larger cultural context and also ecological context. So that's what we're thinking about, how wayfinding can play on many different roles. And also we decided is this is probably one of the first integrated public art project happening in Markham. Is there are both proposals. When we did the open call and an artist understand they have to conceive something, carry a functional aspect of it. So for Nestor's project, you will see it's supposed to be conceived as a set of 13 tree grates and tree guards, because there are going to be a lot of new trees going to be planted during the restoration project. And we find that can be an interesting thing, and think about this, the space of these tree grates become a narrative board, and what kind of narrative, and it can embed it in the into Main Street Unionville. And then the other element is actually a pathway to connect Main Street Unionville and to the trailhead of Rouge Valley Trails. So how to visualize these connections, but this visualization is also become a place and where art can happen. And so that's kind of the idea of wayfinding. It's operate on many different levels. Once we did that and we did an open call, it became a two-stage open call competitions. And for the first open call, we asked artists to submit their qualifications and also letter of intent. Then we worked with, as we received over 60 submissions at the time. And then we work with the jury member, and on one hand we have arts professionals, curators, artists, and cultural workers, and with their provide their professional knowledge and to value the artistic merits and also cultural merits and technical feasibilities of the proposals. Then also we have community participations, and there's really nice one for Shalina here with us, and who represents the local residents and also BIAs, because after all, they are the ones who we're going to use this space, live with this space day-to-day basis. So it's very important to have their feedback and input into this process. And also, because it's a two-stage process. So the first stage, and the jury selected for each component, and have 5 shortlist artists. And then for the shortlist artists, they each make a proposal. And then we have we convene for the second and the jury meetings. And then the artist will give a presentation. The jury will have the opportunity to ask to clarify the proposals, and then the jury select one proposals, and out of the final 5 lists, and for each category. And that's how Nestor and Patrick receive the commission. Then after that, we also have to, I forgot, when we first conceived the project, the budget, the site, the idea, the theme went to the council. It was approved by the council. Then how we carry out the actual competition. Then once the proposal was selected, we actually go through a very intensive process to obtain the heritage permits and from the heritage committees to get their approval and support endorsed and on proposals to be taken place and on Main Street Unionville. So any construction, even you put up signage, you have to go through the heritage committee and here to get approved. So it was intense process, and I really appreciate the artists, especially Nestor's, and really working with the group there and taking their feedbacks and applied revisions into your design, and really trying to help to stay with your artistic integrity, but really taking into considerations of locals' feedback, and trying to give a proposal, a design that can balance and a different side of the voices. So I really, really appreciate it, because we were not required and to actually give presentation and address them directly, but you were kind enough to do that. So thank you for that. So after that process, we get to this point, and the work is actually, we can already show you. We did a shop visit yesterday, and we saw the mock-up, because actually the process of procuring fabricator took quite a while, and that's the back and forth, because this model of producing the artwork is the first time in the city. So there's a lot of behind the scenes stories and how to set up the precedents and to make this scheme working. It took a while, but luckily, happily, we're doing that. So for the next steps is Nestor's tree grates and the tree guards will be installed first in the late, hopefully around June-ish. That can happen as part of the restoration constructions. Then after that, once they find the right moment later this year, and the set of fence will go in there. And then for Patrick's project, that is going to take a bit longer because it's not gonna, we cannot start until the street renovation is finished. So once that part of construction is done, we will actually implement Patrick's work. But parallel to the process that you will mention later is there is a participatory process that will require the community's input to actually finalize generating the content. That will be kind of interesting. I think that will be the first time for permanent public art work in Markham to actually adopt this kind of a participatory making process. So I think that's pretty much I want to cover, give you this a brief context of what happened and how we get to this point. And now I'm just going to give you a brief introduction of the artist. And so first, Nestor Kruger is a Toronto-based visual artist whose work has been featured in numerous exhibitions, both locally and internationally. And his exhibitions, including presentations at the Frankfurt Constantine in Antwerp, Belgium, the 7th edition of the Shaga Biennial Center for Curatorial Studies of Art College in New York State, and the Power Plant Contemporary Art Gallery in Toronto. And he has also held solo exhibition at the Canty Foundation in Markham, Texas, the Gallery of Ontario in Toronto, and the Contemporary Art Gallery in Vancouver. Kruger is currently an associate professor in studio art at the University of Guelph.
Okay, so, and thanks everybody for being here. I wrote down on this rainy day, but it doesn't look rainy any longer, so on this sunny day. So I'm going to go through a kind of modified version of what I presented for my presentation for the jury, and with some updated content and some additional content on my own work. So I'm going to start with a few examples of artwork, which include 3 public commissions that in different ways relate to the work I proposed for the Main Street of Unionville. This is Pond from 2009. Pond is a public art frieze that wraps around West Harbour City in Toronto between the 2nd and 3rd floor. Each panel depicts an arrangement of lily pads and flowers arranged to represent 1 or 2 constellations found in the Northern Hemisphere. The flowers represent the primary stars in the constellation, and each lily pad represents one of the secondary stars within the constellation border. The constellation of lily pads and flowers of the frieze are presented as simple forms cut from slabs of granite and marble. From close, Pond depicts a water lily scene, but from a distance, this scene appears in an arrangement of stars, as the color of the lily pads fade into the dark background of the black granite. With this work, and perhaps in many of the work I've made and continue to make, I was trying to find a way to generate an image, one that was driven by external factors, like using a found pattern to generate another, to, in a sense, connect what might initially appear as a random arrangement of elements with something familiar. I'm not sure if anybody was able to connect the pattern of the lily pad scene to something that also felt familiar to them, but I did imagine and hope that there would be at least one viewer who was able to make this connection, preferably unprompted, and a connection that I managed would generate a moment of pleasure in the viewer. This is an image that I hope would be familiar to all of you. It is based on Ursa Major, the Great Bear, or the Big Dipper. and is one of the most prominent constellations in the Northern Hemisphere. Finding this constellation helps in finding the North Star, an important navigational aid. The two large stars in the bucket point to Polaris, which is at the end of the handle of the Little Dipper. This is color transit from the same year. This consists of 3 evenly spaced rows of rods that weave in and through one another. Each row is painted in one of the primary colors, red, yellow, and blue. It was designed to create a kind of animated experience of color mixing that might occur as one passes the shelter either on foot, bicycle, car, or transit. You might be able to get a sense of this mixing in the image by the subtle appearance of secondary colors such as purple, green, and orange. This experience is created by the appearance and disappearance of different colored rods as the angle of the moving spectator changes. I was thinking of creating an experience that addressed a moving rather than static subject. It was a response to a kind of fleeting and peripheral experience we have as we move through an urban environment, either lost in thought or on our phones engaged with another subject. This image shows more evidence of the primary colors and the distinct areas or shapes that they occupy and how these rows are woven into one another. The elevated and moving TTC passenger has, in a sense, an optimal view of the work. This is Fountain Grove from 2014. Fountain Grove is a collaboration with the artist Carlos Sesta. Installed for the Developer Plaza and located just north of Lakeshore and a couple blocks west of Bathurst. The 6 sculptures sit above the Garrison Creek Culvert, an underground waterway that carries a buried river to the lake. The forms were designed to evoke the fountain or geyser. It is also a repeating rotational pattern that is intended to produce a feeling of water rising and falling. So each sculpture is a single moment in an animated sequence, beginning with a small curled donut in the foreground and concluding with the tallest form. One can think of it as 6 frames of a looping animation presented as static sculptural forms. This is called Carry It Once, and it was an exhibition at the now closed Benjamin Diaz. This exhibition is titled Carry It Once from 2016. It was designed to intentionally appear as an arrangement of flagstone, and it was inspired by a series of paintings by the American artist Jasper Johns, titled with the same names. Johns used the motif of the flagstones after seeing the wall pattern in a small store, which he recreated from memory. The pattern for the paintings, however, is produced using a series of steps, beginning with a custom font I created. The font I created replaced the letter form with a single dot placed at a different location within a fixed area for each letter. So when the font is used as a series of dots, it appears on the page rather than letter forms, creating a kind of irregular noise pattern. This pattern is necessary for generating another pattern called a Voronoi diagram, a mathematical pattern that interestingly evokes patterns found in nature, including flagstones. I was interested in finding a way to reproduce the stone pattern of the Johns painting while also creating something that would generate the stone pattern rather than simply copying the stones or arbitrarily creating a series of interlocking shapes. So the paintings resemble the Johns painting while also encoding a text into an image resembling a stone pattern. The work contains both a desire to reproduce the formal puzzle of the Jasper Johns painting and the form of a parable, which is an abbreviated story of daily life that contains a didactic message. The text for these paintings is based on an explanation of a phenomenon called the Brazil nut effect, where large objects separate and rise to the surface and small objects fall to the bottom when a mixture of granular materials is vibrated. This is why the Brazil nuts always appear at the top of a can of mixed nuts, but also why there always seem to be new stones in an empty field. I combine this explanation with a text by the psychiatrist Carl Jung explaining the subconscious. The process of linking different and perhaps disparate things has come to represent a way of working for me that I've continued to explore, and a process that has found its way into the Main Street Public Art Project. Now I'd like to discuss the project for Unionville by first beginning with the story. In 1839, an American millwright named Ira White purchased 100 acres of land in an area that would later become known as Unionville. That same year, White built a sawmill on a property nearby to prepare the lumber he needed to build a grist mill. The grist mill was built a year later beside Bruce Creek, a branch of the Rouge River running through his property. To provide a consistent flow of water to the grist mill, White created a mill pond by damming the creek. The new pond, referred to first simply as the pond, then later as Willow Pond, is known today as Two Good Pond, the name of the Albertan family who purchased the property in 1939. A meandering path connecting the two mills would later become the Main Street of Unionville, as small cottages and houses began to appear along the lane. I thought about the story briefly describing the growth of Unionville, and in particular how the river supplied the energy to run the saw, to create the mill, to mill the grain, in order to produce the flour needed to supply the people with the energy to build the town. The cycle was driven by the meandering path of the Rouge River and its many tributaries like Bruce Creek. The story represents for me the movement of energy from one system to another, from a river system to a mechanical system to a biological system, and is not meant to be a monument to the life of Ira White, but just one of the many stories or branches connected to the site. This slide shows the location of the two mills. At the top is the location of the grist mill, which White named Union Mills, in an apparent reference to the Act of Union proclaimed by the British Parliament in 1841 that united the colonies of Upper and Lower Canada, and a connection to the first post office, and the connection the first post office would also make in 1849 when choosing the name of the emerging village. The path connecting the two mills detoured slightly along the valley edge to avoid the low, swampy land. Main Street still follows this path today. In the 1930s, during a flash flood, the mill race washed away, and then 4 years later, in 1934, the mill was destroyed by fire and never rebuilt. The original sawmill by Ira White in 1839 is currently located at 139 Main Street. William Meakin purchased the mill in 1854 from Ira, and then Robert Harrington in 1881 from William. The sawmill was operated by the Harringtons until 1960, then A. Giles converted it to a planing mill until it was destroyed by two fires, one in 78 and the other in 83. When I begin a project like this, it is always important to me to find a way to create a direct reference or link to the site, to a physical feature like an architectural detail or a property of the landscape, in addition to the social and historical connections like the story of Ira White. For this project, I chose the boards for the siding of the two houses bracketing the fence site, which I think is a distinctive feature for many buildings in the Unionville downtown because of the important function that the planing mill had for the village. However, in one house, the boards are oriented horizontally, clapboard, and in the other vertically, board and batten, creating alternating patterns, but also a kind of binary relationship between the two styles, and an aspect that I have used to generate features of the public sculpture. Oddly, the counterposed folds in the boards I designed, which you'll see later, creates a diamond that echoes the ornamental diamond of the window shutters of the clapboard house, so a happy accident. It is important to me that the sculptures borrow or incorporate elements of the site into their forms, particularly visible elements like a type of biological adaptation. I hope on one level the work would in a sense blend into the environment by mirroring or echoing aspects of these two patterns, but perhaps a little imprecisely, so as not to completely disappear. Another important thread in the project was a connection to the Rouge River watershed, which I wanted to represent through the meandering shape of the river. A river meanders because the disturbance in the flow affects the speed of the flow, creating both fast and slow-moving water. Fast-moving water erodes or carves the bank of the river, called a cut bank, and the slow-moving water deposits sediments on the bank, a point bank, thereby changing the shape and path of the river until a type of equilibrium is reached. In a sense, meandering is the path created by the movement from disequilibrium to equilibrium, a dynamic process that is always undergoing change and transformation. Understanding how the path of a river changes served as a potential metaphor for the path an individual or a town might take. So the river produces energy, which Ira needed for his mill. I was interested in the potential dilemma that Ira may have faced. Build a sawmill first or a grist mill? A decision that might have been obvious to him at the time. Nevertheless, the decision to build a sawmill first before the grist mill symbolizes for me the proverbial fork in the road. First create the sawmill to build the materials to create the grist mill, to grind the grain, to produce the flour, to feed the people. This chain representing the movement of energy from one system to another is something I found interesting in terms of how all these processes are linked. I think systems have more to do with collaboration than they do with competition. Here are the elements in the work, beginning with how I created the individual boards. Both the fence and guards use an 8-bit binary of zeros and ones, or on and off, a system found in digital computing to create forms that represent each lowercase alphabet in the Roman alphabet, and many, many other forms and images we digest every day. It is the base unit of our digital world. The forms for this alphabet were inspired by an accordion folded narrow band of paper. A simple paper fold contains either a valley or mountain fold, so a similar binary system also exists within this practice. This relationship allowed me to create a series of folded forms based on the 8-bit binary system that can then be used to construct words. There are 10 segments in each sculptural element, 8 segments to represent the binary system, plus the addition of a head and foot to emphasize their creatureliness. A fold occurs when a change appears in the sequence of values. A fold to the left designates a 0, a fold to the right designates a 1, no change, no fold. I think of change in this case as the disturbance that alters the path of the river and creates both the meandering path or zigzag pattern. Below is a profile view of all 26 fence boards showing their distinct zigzag pattern. The one at the very right is the space key. Using these letter forms, I created a sequence of words which I thought of as a kind of poetic description of the village. Each object noun is preceded by either a definite or indefinite article to modify the noun and to alternate between the specific and the general, which forms another reference to either moving one way or another. The list is in many ways the simplest form to describe a space by enumerating all the key objects it contains. This is an orthogonal view of the fence showing the placement of the text and the different rotations of the base, which I employed to create a more organic relationship. You can also see the sequence of words in the correct order. This is another image of that view. This text is read left to right when facing a fence from the street. While this type of accordion fold is fundamentally a letter form representing a character in the alphabet, it also evokes for me a type of meandering path when viewed from the side, but also a spring, an object with a unique capacity to store and release energy, or even a hinge. These sculptural elements therefore contain several different interpretations: a meandering path, a storage and release of energy, and lastly, an articulated being with hinge joints capable of rotational movement. It is this last interpretation that I am referring to in the project title, Little Creatures, a title inspired by a work called Bichos, Bugs in Spanish, by the Brazilian artist Ligia Clark. Bichos is an interactive work with numerous potential states driven by 4 possible actions or operations: fold, turn, close, or open. I think there's an implied animation with any object that contains joints, whether biological or mechanical. It is an animation in the sculpture that I hope one will imagine driven by an internal rather than external force, and therefore seemingly capable of independent movement, and by one definition, potentially alive. Part of my interest in these forms was the opportunity to eliminate a support structure where the posts and rails, whether the posts and rails to support the pickets for the fence or the ribs holding the vertical elements together in a typical tree guard. These elements stand both independently and as a gathering. The small diagonal hinge at the fold extends out in the opposite direction and creates both an opening and a diamond shape, which happily echoes the diamond shape on the window shutters that I mentioned earlier. I'm going to go through a few renderings of different views of the fence. This is looking west. This is a detail looking west again. I hope it's west. And this is looking northeast. The following 13 tree guards and grates have been designed to enumerate a list of subjects related to movement and processes of transformation in an arrangement that evokes the rotational movement and form of the water wheel. Each tree guard contains an 8-letter agent noun using the same process to create the zigzag pattern of the fence pickets. An agent noun is a verb that becomes a noun when the suffix er is added to the verb. The grammatical unit refers to someone or something performing an action. When I was young, I named our 2 dogs Digger and Jumper for these very reasons. The grates and guards are designed to create a sense of rotational movement, a movement to echo the action of the water wheel. The 4 sections that compose each grate rotate approximately 27 degrees within the fixed frame of the grate to produce the appearance of a full rotational sequence and across all 13 guards and grates. This slide shows the placement of the subjects along the street. Each subject has to do with a sense of transformation, whether through movement or change. I do have one subject who lingers, someone more conditioned to enjoy the fruits of everyone else's labor and movement. This slide shows the rotation of all the grates. But I think it is this slide provides a clear example of that rotation, which the inclusion of the heavier red line. This is a detail showing a small ornamental pattern that functions as a little disturbance, interrupting the pattern of lines. This is a detail showing, the guards consist of 8 zigzag pattern pickets and 4 straight pickets. I designed the guards to evoke the water wheel of the mill. So the 4 flat pickets are representative of the paddles, and the zigzag pattern functions as a kind of turbulence in that form. The order and arrangement of the zigzag pickets are determined by the same process to produce the letter forms for the fence boards, where a fold to one side designates a 0 and a fold to the other a 1, and a repeating 0 or 1, no fold at all. The orientation of each picket alternates to create a little bit more movement in the guards, which you can see on the top view. The next 2 slides are renderings of the grates and guards and how they relate to the fence. Corten steel was selected for a number of reasons. The surface is more durable than paint. It has a more natural and organic appearance, which introduces small differences across the surface on each element. So each element has a surface quality distinct from the others. And because this surface will slowly change over time from a bright orange to a dark brownish gray. It is also the surface used for all the bridges and signs along Bruce Creek and the Rouge River, so an important formal connection. This is the view facing north towards Colton Road. That's me. These images were taken yesterday, so brand new. I'm standing beside a mock-up of the guards and grates produced by the fabricator. The mock-up was built in mild steel, so not the material we will be using. It can be difficult to truly understand how all the elements work together without producing a full-scale mock-up, no matter how accurate the renderings may appear. An image cannot replace an encounter with a real thing, because an encounter with a real thing gives us a better understanding of our relationship to that thing as a human being. So seeing the mock-up and noting how it made me feel was still a surprise for me. I've discussed a lot of steps and links in the project, but it's just to share with you how I work, and I do not expect others to uncover or make these links themselves. I was interested in fundamentally to create an experience for the viewer of an organic pattern of forms. I imagine that some may simply see a pattern of zigzag lines, perhaps intuitively generated without any underlying structure or force driving the pattern. Others may note similarities between the different elements and perhaps conclude that there are copies within the pattern that are repeated. And others may see or recognize the structure and spend time trying to understand the logic of that structure. Earlier, I mentioned the literary device of the parable as something that contains within its form two narratives or messages. The Roman philosopher Lucretius, in his text on nature, had a beautiful definition of an object that I often think about, which I will paraphrase. An object gets in your way. So the fact that a parable, in a sense, contains two objects, if we accept the conceit that ideas or stories can be objects, these objects are not one on top of the other or one inside the other, but literally two objects occupying the same space. And it's something that always intrigued me about the parable. In the parable, someone will be able to recognize or feel one story, while others will get an entirely different story. Finally, I'd like to end on a photo of Lillian Parkinson taken around 1918. Lillian Parkinson was a telephone operator at the Unionville telephone office. This photo shows her seated in front of her switchboard, which was located at the back of Perkins' hardware store at 159 Main Street. Pearl Rainey ran the first telephone exchange in the rear section of the hardware store, which was built around 1873 by John Eckhart, who sold it later to John Dunn, who then leased it to Reuben Stiver, who then sold it to John Ramsey. In 1981, William Paget and Alexander Hay bought the property, opening Hardware and Horse. And in 1918, the property fell into the hands of J.W. Perkins, who opened the Perkins Hardware Store. Today is the home for the Crocodile. I consider art as an opportunity to create connections. The artist adopts the role of the switchboard operator, connecting people to things, and people to the past, present, and future. These connections can create disturbances that alter the path of the individual. I think the role of public art is to perform these various acts, whether intentional or unintentional. So I've attempted to draw connections in this proposed work to the path of Ira White, the energy and properties of the river, the growth of the village of Unionville, and a simple accordion fold in order to convey the qualities and virtues of a meandering path in relation to the contingent properties of the site. Thank you.
Such a beautiful, thoughtful research process, and I think a lot when he was presenting to the heritage communities and people who live here, and too a lot of historical materials and stories with new and definitely for myself. I learned so much. And I think it's the beautiful part of it. It's not like historical facts, but how this is historical facts, the stories, whether it's ecological or it's economics, and really shaping the shape and how women feel become a place. So really feel how these layers things and it really comes together, but end with such an abstract form, right? And I think it's just the zigzags, and the kids can enjoy it. So I think it's a beautiful part, and for public art, as how many ways you can actually enter into, and really having a dialogue with the place. I'm really looking forward and for it to happen and be on the street. And I think we'll also talk about it is to how to produce and to give a narrative in the dialectic and to the work, how that become a place, or creating a new kind of not fiction, what is the word for it? Fable, which I call fable, right? And how this kind of a narrative can help you facilitate, imagine with the work, not necessary to dictate you how to experience, and what we're trying to tell you. So beautifully put it together. Thank you. And then next up we have Patrick Cruz and Patrick Cruz. Patrick Cruz is an artist, educator, and a warrior, who considers the role of a spirituality, improvisation, intuition, humor, and play as emancipatory tools to ratify embedded colonial frameworks and ideologies in our making. In 2021, we received the prestigious 13th Artist Award from the Culture Center of the Philippines, and won the national title for the 17th RDC Canadian Painting Competition in 2015. He's an assistant professor in studio art at the University of Toronto Starmore campus and at Daniel Scholarly at St. George Belmont campus. He is the founder and co-director of the Kamai's Triennial, co-curator of Banff, Florence, and Berkeley with Christian Prestige, collaborator at Varley with Netherlands, And all of the 19 members of the artists from the center of the poem.
What an incredible presentation, Nestor. So I guess just to give a backdrop of my work, I haven't really done many public art pieces, but this is probably one of the most recent ones that I did for MoCA, Museum of Contemporary Art in Toronto. And this was a light box that was sort of, they commissioned each artist to put on an image for 3 months. And it was sort of a site responsive work. And initially I thought, because there was so much development going on, I thought it would be funny to create a Realtor ad using my high school photo. And it was sort of a cheeky kind of critique to the gentrification of the community, but it was also speaking to the lack of spaces that artists needed for studios and as cultural producers, you know. And it was funny to use this sort of language of authority and language of institution, and actually got to hire someone from Fiverr to create the ad, who's a professional graphic designer for realtors, because I really needed this look that was convincing. And we had a burner phone where people could basically call this guy, which was me. And we basically had conversations just about the ad itself and the sort of context. Some people actually thought MoCA was being sold, which is kind of interesting. And right now, it's kind of incredible because this was just 2 years ago. And now if you see this neighborhood, it's completely transformed. So this was one work. It was called Crownland. And I mean, if you look at it closely, it's, I spelled my name very differently, like Tom Cruise. It's Patrick Cruz. And with a jester's cap, I thought that would been a nice sort of stepping point to know that it's actually, you know, an artwork, not real. So it's sort of blurring those boundaries. It's also interesting that no one knew that it was me, because I mean, you can't really tell how old I am there. Another public work that I've done, what's it called? Stepmother Tongue, which I did in Vancouver. Sorry, I'm just going to go through this slide quick. Which was the working with TransLink, which is a bus in basically the TTC in Vancouver. And we did, this was basically inspired by the pre-syllabic language that is now extinct through colonization. This sort of written language in the Philippines was basically erased, but there's some kind of revival from the younger generation, from scholars, who's not necessarily to implement it as a practical language, but more so sort of revisiting these sort of symbols because it holds so much history. So this was sort of my attempt to retrieve this knowledge, but also essentially mistranslate it in a sense. So we did a lot of programming inside the bus where we did freestyle rap performances that had to do with language, and poetry also was installed within the buses. So the bus became that kind of metaphor of container for language, for conversations, but also since it's a public space that's mobile. So it was kind of fun. I think it ran for a little bit. I don't know what happened to the skin. I wasn't able to get my hands on it. And this was technically a group show too. So there was other artists that was activating these sites. Finally, another project that I do is Kitchen Codex, which is a cooking project. So this is a food-based project that I started in Guelph, Ontario, where a collective called Post Commodity was doing an art residency and invited the public to submit a project. And the first iteration of this project was me basically serving food, cooking Filipino food in exchange for people's recipes. And these have been archived I've done it in maybe 6 or 7 different places now, different cities. So each recipe is like in a different language, depending on the site. And I would also adapt the ingredients based on what's available. And in the end, these sort of collected recipes became a cookbook in the form of a tablecloth, which again sort of resets that cycle where people eat again on this table full of recipes and this sort of exchange of history, exchange of ancestral knowledge. And it, some people who didn't know how to cook, basically they just wrote like butter on toast, and that was enough to get a meal from me. So this is an ongoing project from 2014 going onwards. So, I guess there's another public art that I also recently did in Vancouver, which is, this was in a condo in Surrey. It's like a suburb in Vancouver. And this was called Flower Bed. And this is sort of these kind of abstracted panels, ceramic frit panels. So they were baked in the glass. And these are collages of flowers that are normally found in Surrey. So, which has a lot more connection to the public art work that I'm doing here in Markham. And Flower Bed is mostly sort of just using the metaphor of flowers as sort of like how cultures cross-pollinate. Because Surrey is such a diverse city, it was sort of interesting to talk about the kind of newcomers and the sort of histories that come in and out. I guess almost like pollen, thinking of cultural pollen. There's some kind of hidden characters that I embedded in there. They're kind of like Easter eggs that I plotted in, but they're not necessary if they're also found out. So yeah, this is actually an electrical room for the building. So it was sort of kind of an interesting space to situate a public art piece, to activate a space where normally there would be no sort of engagement with the public. All right, so moving on to the public piece. So I was I submitted to the competition where it was about the site that basically connects the Unionville strip. Is that the right term? Main Street, and to the Rouge River tributary. So when I was thinking about this site, it was sort of an interesting thing to think about because it's a parking lot basically. It's such an inspiring site to draw inspiration from cars. But it made me think a lot about this sort of relationship between nature and modernity, and sort of that bridge between those two sites. So when I tried to do a site visit to do research, I basically tried to meander into the forest. I guess you can't really call that a forest, but it's a patch of nature. So I went for a walk, and basically I had this idea to gather different types of flora and fauna in the trail, um, and started to identify these sort of plants. A lot of them were foreign to me, and a lot of them were also, I wasn't sure if they were native to Markham itself, which was also interesting because obviously it was abundant. So this was one of them, these sort of bedstraw, this meadow anemone, wild cucumber. So there was like, I mean, this was also, I only gleaned this from one visit, so I'm sure there was a lot that I also missed. So when we went there, I was gathering these, and I was thinking of how to sort of create a design that would bring traces of the natural space into that parking lot. And so one way of thinking of it was to do a cyanotype print, and using the river's water to develop it, to sort of create that immediate dialogue with the work, but also almost create like a kind of agency for the river to make an imprint. So basically, like kind of forcing this relationship in a strange way. So these weeds were developed using the water with the chemicals that was used for cyanotype printing, and that's how it developed into these prints on fabric. And these fabric pieces, I started to think about how they could be translated into the material that was needed for the public art, which Yan would let me know what was the name again of the material. Thermoplastic. Yes, thermoplastic. The pavement. Yeah. So the challenge of this thermoplastic was that it doesn't take too much detail in terms of gradation, which is kind of counter to the material of cyanotype printing, because it has this kind of erratic casting of the traces. So I had to basically find a way to simplify these sort of designs, which almost made them very graphic. So these are a few samples. That's the infamous handrail. So this is sort of what happened with the process. So I tried to slowly saturate these colors that would simplify the edges to get more definition on the edges. And this would sort of, I guess, obviously with the consideration of the limitations of thermoplastic, it had to sort of fit as a cutout, not too complex that it can sort of still produce interesting shapes, but not too complex that it would sort of lose the definition of it. So this was sort of my idea, was to kind of mimic, to also mimic not just the color of the cyanotype, but also kind of reference to the river, right? Because the river was played such a big role in determining the direction of this project. So this is sort of a rough design of basically just taking a section and kind of blowing it up. So a new element of this proposal is that we're hoping to engage the public to host a cyanotype gathering of materials from the trail to collaborate onto the final design of the pathway. And and in a way that will sort of be like is going to be co-authored by the community, but also also by the people who will participate here in Unionville. So that was the sort of a new direction that was added to the proposal, and yeah, pretty excited. What else did I have? So yeah, I think I wasn't sure when this will be slated, but obviously it will be after Nestor's project. So roughly around 2026.
And I should say there's a little plaza where the fence that Nestor's doing is going to be, and steps from there down to the east lane. That's where Patrick's farm is. So they're actually sort of interconnected in a way, but they're very close to the lane. So.
Yeah, so I think that there is two, it's basically really the wayfindings, and then the path will be connected. Actually, you can see, just see how it's photo, and there are two patches of green space set along the staircases. So on top of the staircases is the fencing, and then the fencing will actually become super the middle point for that 13 tree grates and tree guards and will unfold. Then we are thinking this already allocated budget, and then those two are already currently enough and to agree to work on together is these two will be the garden. So that will be a garden that we envision to be indigenous garden, but also we're going to understand is what it means and to be an indigenous garden and beyond just some indigenous plants there. Yeah. So these two patches of green space will be transformed as well through this process. But like it's not going to happen until around the time when Patrick's projects happen. Because all that has to be wait until the Main Street construction completed.
Full makeover.
Hey, Markham for almost 25 years now. I worked on this one. No, I actually know you were going through this. And just trying to get, I feel like I live in a cultural desert. And I'm tired of having to go to Main Street West. And I see
That's all we came from.
So I try to get back involved in my community because I feel like I can support this work. And it's really important. So I really appreciate listening to the artists come up with their ideas, and just to know that some of us in the community that wants to see one. Don't care about the and to see that Unionville is not what it was. It's totally changed. And I think there's so much potential. It's such a beautiful place. And so I one day came, I didn't know what to expect. So I was like, and then I just really appreciate what you're all doing. And I hope to see more of it. And I want to have to always original and see something even interesting.
Yes, that's how you come from.
I recognize you from your
It's for sure.
and I feel like I'm really happy. I feel like just the few last shows I've seen, they're very good. Like it's really good and free.
Yes, that's really, it's precious.
And I'm really pleased to hear about the community aspect because I think like for the community aspect, we need to be involved. And not just say, oh, here you go.
Yeah.
And I know it's painful.
But this process is important. I think if we don't go through this, and it's always just one thing there, then, because I really think these processes are making them. There's no existing problem. So how each work is making its own product, is generating its own product. And also, I think it was important to show part of the jury composition and how these two artists were selected, but they both educated themselves. So they understand their work and their practice. There's a certain interface is education. And there's a pedagogical aspect is always embedded in their work. So you know whether it's conscious or unconscious because it's important. So I think that's why we thought it's also appropriate for artists and have this kind of sensitivity, that those sensitivity will be translated in the work, and then the work will be felt by its audience.
And there's such a potential for economic reason as well, like being able to become a destination for this, because we're starving for it. I am starving. I'm having to go to Newmarket to see theater. I'm having to go to Waterloo to see a picture, because all the artists have moved away. Right. So if we can build something in New York region, and really hope it happens. Yeah, well, it gets bigger.
Jan's working on
Yeah, and also it's interesting is when I think of more from the management or council level, for things to happen in Markham, for Unionville Street, when we were first directed to think about a project for the street, there was expectation to push for some spectacular, something really spectacular, and maybe one large scale, a type of shining object. But we're really trying to study and understand the vibe here, and what will be a proper vibe for here, and especially to think about as an urban scape, and what is there any space and pocket left to for public art to happen. Then we decided the most appropriate way to do it is not really competing with everything else, but in a very quiet, subtle way, and to me, it's like a water. All water penetrates a place, and then all these projects actually like water penetrates a place. It will become a destination, but not through this kind of Star Trek way, but it's really able to integrate it and into this place and become part of this place. That's what we hope eventually people can enjoy. Thank you.